What we're looking at are screenshots of Aleph Null, which is a visual interactive generative piece that I wrote in JavaScript using the HTML5 canvas tag. The screenshots give you some indication of the stylistic range that Aleph Null can display as an instrument of color music. The idea of color music goes back at least to the beginning of the 20th century. It's a metaphor. There's no audio. It's simply that one plays this thing like one plays a musical instrument. Only what one produces is visual, not sonic. I was interested to explore the HTML5 canvas tag, which is touted as a replacement for Flash. It's nowhere near as featureful as Flash visually, so it's not going to replace Flash anytime soon at all. But it is an open source thing. JavaScript is open source, whereas Flash is proprietary. So JavaScript will eventually reach the state of Flash, I guess. And one of the things about open source projects is that you have multiple people, multiple nodes working on the language, changing the language. Whereas with a corporate product, you have just one node, the corporation, working on and changing the language. So open source projects can be more adaptive to the needs of people. And it does seem that open source projects are capable of at least coming to their logical conclusion as ideas, whereas it seems that in proprietary languages they're usually cut short for one reason or another that usually relates to this singleness of the mode of development of the language or the product versus the multiple node nature of the development of JavaScript or open source projects. Anyway, let's have a look at the actual interactive piece itself. My cat wants in on the project. She's going to leap onto my desk any minute now. We're going to get a screen full of cat. Well, she's still trying to figure it out. Hopefully she won't figure it out real soon. Anyway, here we are in Aleph Null itself. And there's instructions down here on how to play with Aleph Null. And you can use the greater than and less than keys to cycle through instructions, but get rid of those and click this, the Aleph Null symbol, and what we see are some controls. Now the basic idea of Aleph Null is that you can set the central color. So there I've just change the central color by using this color picker. And you can also change the color range. Now there's the central color, and all the other colors are randomly distributed around the central color. However, if I change the color range, if I set that down to 0, then all we see is the central color being drawn, and no other colors at all. Whereas, if I change the color range to 86, then we do see some variation of color around the central color. And if I increase it up to 255, then we get any old color being drawn. So usually it starts out being set, I think, if I remember correctly, which doesn't always happen, it starts out being set somewhere around 100. So yes, that's the central color and the color range, and you can click to change the central color a little bit. So if I click, you see that the color changes just a little bit, and if I click again, then you see that the central color changes a little bit again. You can see the central color change here when I click. Yep, okay. So that's one way to change the central color. You can also change it through this box right here. Okay. Now, we've also got an adjustable shape slider. If I change this to, say, tangents, then we see that we've got a different shape being drawn. Now it's a straight line that remains tangent to the curve that the line is following. And there's an opacity slider. Now, an opacity slider is nice in a thing of digital art because, you know, in digital art, as a visual artist, you don't have lots of the things that visual artists in the real world enjoy, such as texture. However, opacity in digital art gives you things like dimension. You can create dimension with opacity, and things like layers. So opacity is a real nice thing to get a handle on as a digital artist, as a visual artist. And yes, we have an opacity slider in Aleph Null. We also have a fader slider. So if I increase this up to the max, then we see that, well, we don't see much now, do we? Because everything is being erased, is being faded rather quickly. However, if I turn the fader off, then we see that nothing is being erased. So the fader is a way of progressively fading the whole screen out, either quickly or slowly, such as the case may be. There's also an About window, which gives you lots of text, lots of information about Aleph Null. And you can do things like stop it, you can erase it, you can do things like make it mouse controlled rather than the position of the thing being programmatic, and various other features like that. You play it like an instrument of color music. That's the idea. And Aleph Null fits into a site, namely vispo.com, that is concerned with writing, with interactive writing, with visual writing, with interactive audio, with sound poetry. So this is the most recent place that my work has gone, work that does tend to be quite visual. We showed this piece recently at the Sorbonne in Paris at a conference on innovative writing, and I was really happy that they decided to, want to have that piece shown at a conference on innovative writing, because that's, I hope, what my site is all about, is innovative, interactive, visual, sonic, intermedial writing. Yeah, sometimes writing, sometimes it tends more towards the visual, sometimes more towards music. But usually there's some mix. I mean, after all, I did write this whole thing in JavaScript. It wasn't something I painted. It was a matter of learning how to draw with math and the Canvas API. It was very much a matter of writing in a strange way. And I do think that poetry now is a term that has the range, more like a term like visual art rather than a term like prose. There used to be that prose versus poetry antithesis. They both had the same sort of range, but they don't anymore. Poetry has a much larger range now, and as I say, a range more appropriate or more like a term like visual art, because poetry, like writing, is now often quite involved in the visual or the sonic, the coded, the screenplay, the character, the letter, the form. Because in computers, everything is coded in zeros and ones, whether it's visual or sonic or textual. There is a dissolve between the boundaries of media themselves, and consequently the boundaries between arts and media are somewhat more fluid than in previous days. So that's a little bit of the context of Aleph Null. Thanks for your time.